I'm here with Kevin Ali, who is the CEO of Organon, also co-chair of the APEC CEO Summit. I want to start, Kevin, first of all with why are you co-chair? Why are you engaged with APEC? Because it's one of these quirky collections of economies that a lot of Americans don't think about until we host it in San Francisco.
Well, you know, Diane, we're a new company. We've spun out from a larger company just a couple of years ago. We wanted to have an opportunity to bring the concept of women, R&D and women's health to the forefront. And I saw an opportunity in the fact that the best kind of public-private partnerships in terms of all the incubator ideas that comes about, and the public side and the private side. And then when I had the opportunity, when the team brought to me, said, would you like, and actually the White House was interested as well, we want big companies, we want small companies, we want companies focused on kind of health care. And as you noticed recently, the White House announced, I didn't have anything to do with it.
Coincidentally a women's
that there's
health
a focus on an initiative for women's health R&D. So it all kind of came about, and I wanted this to kind of come into the mainstream in terms of the agenda, decision makers, discussions, and it's proved to be pretty beneficial.
So I love this intersection of policy and business at the APEC Summit, but obviously the policy makers are what we're paying attention to as well right now. We've heard President Biden speak and give remarks. Obviously there were meetings with President Xi. What do you take away from this? Give us your interpretation of the message and how is it being received?
So I'll talk about from a kind of a macro perspective, and then my own experience.
Okay.
So macro perspective, I think, we met actually the Vice President of China about 4 months ago in conjunction with the UNGA in New York, and a number of CEOs came and said, and we had not pre-planned this, we said, if there's one thing you can do, make sure that President Xi, please, comes to APEC, because the United States, the world needs to see these two presidents speak together. And I think what you've been able to tell is, now we have military to military dialogue, we have other dialogues that are ongoing, maybe they'll have more meetings. And then privately, I met with President Biden before he gave his speech, and he actually talked about that meeting. Mm-hmm. And what he said is he felt really good about it, that there was a kind of, they know each other well. And so there was a kind of
That's right, because they would have engaged when he was vice president too.
Exactly.
Yeah.
And so they know each other well, they were talking about issues, and so that, from a perspective, a macro perspective, I think is good for us. Calm things down in terms of...
Good for us as Americans, good for us as business leaders?
As the world. From my own personal perspective, I did have a chance to talk to the president about the recent announcement on Monday about women's health R&D, and he said, this is the First Lady's idea, I fully support, let's get going, let's get started, and so I think it's worked out well.
So I'm intrigued actually about this focus on women's health. I mean, you're a big company, why? Because that is very much when I was reading up on the background of the spin-off, and why women's health in particular?
Couple of reasons. One, we already had a business in women's health, both in contraception and fertility and other areas. Two, let's just say R&D was always the missing component over the last, say, 2 or 3 decades. If you were to ask me this question 5 years ago, it may not be that we're a women's health focused company, but today there's more in R&D of small, medium-sized companies coming up, and the most important thing is they're looking at women's health now with a different scope, a view beyond reproductive health, because it's always historically been focused on reproductive health. But now we're talking about maternal health, we're talking about gynecologic health, we're talking about menopausal health, we're talking about a number of areas that affect a woman's life throughout all the stages. And so what we're trying to do is invest our capital allocation going to business development to bring in assets, both in development stage where we take it over, partnerships, in licensing, to solve some of these needs across the world.
I think what's interesting is to look at the rest of the world, because this could just be any other conference, any other U.S. business conference, if not for the fact that there are 20 other economies here, many other players here. When you look at the other markets of Asia Pacific, I know there's Latin America, et cetera, how have those markets been in terms of engaging with them as business opportunities for you as a leader?
Well, currently, the hot topic in the Asia Pacific region is primarily about demographic resilience. That's a theme that everybody's using here.
Because of falling birth rates, like what, 17 of 21, right, of the economies have
Exactly.
falling birth rates?
I don't want to call out any countries, but you need about at least 2 per woman in order to replicate the society. They're far below that. So as a result of that, it's almost becoming a national security issue. If by the end of the century, you might have half of the population that you currently have in some APEC Asian Pacific markets. So it's very complex. It's not just about saying, we'll give you some subsidies. It's not about saying
stay home and have babies.
It's not about saying
their
stay home.
leaders shall remain nameless has said that to their population.
Exactly. It's very complex, but it involves all types of support, from IVF therapies to home health care, to support with tutoring with schools.
So are they welcoming you, or is
they
there...
are. They truly are, quietly, in the sense that now they're really serious about investing in ways of being able to solve this demographic issue, because it's something that needs to be addressed now. Because if you try to wait 10 years from now, you're late.
This is my conventional wisdom, so feel free to correct it if I'm wrong, but there is this sense with especially healthcare companies that we pay prices in the US that sometimes subsidize the rest of the world because they have like a unipayer system, or you're dealing with a different entity that has more control, lower income populations. Has that changed at all? I mean, you don't have to name specific countries, but it always feels like it's a bit of a pain point for US healthcare companies going abroad, being able to have the same returns you get in your home market.
I think there's 2 things going on. Number one is, you're right, that the US is paying, let's just say, punching over their weight in terms of the payment for supporting the R&D organizations, the biopharmaceutical sector. And that 2 things need to happen. Those other markets need to start to think about, what do we need to pay adequately for R&D? Because the costs of bringing a product to market are exploding. Exploding.
Why are they exploding?
Well, they're exploding because clinical research costs are so expensive, because the cost of failure is so expensive. I mean, if I tell you the risks, if you get into phase 1, you get phase 1,
yeah.
phase 2, phase 3, phase 1, you have 15% chance that you'll ever make it to the light of day. And even if you cross the finish line and have a product, you have a 50% chance you don't even ever pay back the investment.
It's like a 2-track, you've got the speed of the policy, you've got the speed of the technology, and they move at a different rate.
They need to move it at the better rate in terms of alignment. And so these are things that we're working with as an industry. We want to have responsible pricing on one hand, but at the same time we want to reinvest in R&D to have headspace to be able to go ahead and invest for longer term.
When people talk about innovation, whether it's with the genome or AI, the most exciting area is always healthcare, right?
Mm-hmm.
There's a lot of stuff that induces fear. The healthcare, like, well, no, that's cool. Whether it's cancer, women's health, et cetera. Are you finding that yourself? Are you finding, like, in terms of what you're able to do as a company or just as an industry, how these new technologies are impacting what you focus on?
I think AI is the most promising, especially when it comes to R&D. If you can facilitate a acceleration of understanding what would work, what might work, what wouldn't work, that will speed up the development process. But there's still a lot of questions on the clinical development process. You still need to study the product in patients, the human element.
We only move at a certain speed when you see how it plays out with us, right?
That's right.
Let me go back to end at the policy part, because we talk about politics in the abstract, the 30,000 foot. We're going into an election year. Obviously, one side feels differently than the other. How important is the policy and the politics to you and your ability to get your work done?
Oh my God, it's incredibly important. I mean, most of the world is single payer systems. The US has a different system. You have state level systems here, Medicaid, Medicare, you have a number of different payers. You have single payers outside where you're dealing with one, you have health technology assessments. It's becoming incredibly complex in order to be able to market your products across the world. So having a well-articulated platform, and luckily, having a company that's focused on R&D and women's health gets traction. Because in every country I go, somewhere in the policy statements, there's something about women, whether it's France saying we're going to solve endometriosis, whether it's the UK saying we're going to deal with menopausal symptoms, whether now it's the US saying we should address R&D deficits in women's health. It's starting to percolate across the world. So whenever I go around to talk, I don't have a problem seeing policymakers to talk about what we can do in this space.
This is a warm embrace, a conference like this. We talk about, obviously the opportunities, the good things. Is there anything you'd want to say with regard to the pain points? I mean, when we talk about IP protections, obviously healthcare is one of the big areas because you spend a huge amount on investment, and then if it gets replicated in another market or somewhere else, that comes at the cost to your bottom line. I mean, is that being addressed, or do you feel like that has to be higher on the radar? It's not a leading question, I'm just curious.
No, I think IP globally, at least in the markets that matter for us, let's say that more than 85% of our overall revenue is in pretty good solid state right now in terms of where we are. Yet to see what happens in other larger countries over time, but so far I think that people have a good sense of the fact that IP is working in the way it should. No, I think it's actually pricing, reimbursement, some of these austerity measures, especially in deficit-driven countries where they may take actions in certain areas that have effects, downstream effects on their population. We're all about the fact that you need to have responsible pricing, but then you have to have responsible access strategies as well.
When we talk about women's health, we talk about it from a social impact point of view. We rarely talk about the business model around it and the business implications of investing in women's health. Is there anything you'd want to say, since this is about economics and making money, the value proposition of investing in women's health?
That's a great question, because what I'm kind of a spokesperson for is that people have always considered women's health as some sort of social welfare type
Everybody
of initiative.
Everybody has a mother. Who wouldn't want to care for their mother?
Exactly. I'm here talking about it as a business proposition, as the fact that the economies of scale in terms of being able to solve some of these issues for 50% of the population of the world is something that can have tremendous return on invested capital. And so but the only way you can do that is you've got to prove it. And the only way you prove it is to actually have some products that actually clear what we would call the blockbuster level. And then others say, oh, there may be an opportunity here. And so I'm here as kind of the
brand ambassador.
The
I'm
brand
not
ambassador.
just a businessman, I'm a brand ambassador.
Exactly.
Is there anything else on your radar, Kevin, you want to put on ours?
Well, I think continuous investment in R&D from different sectors, interest from the US government right now, but no single entity can do it alone. We need other pharmaceutical companies, we need other non-governmental organizations, we need the US government. It's a full court press. It's a team sport right now in order to be able to solve some of these issues. Because if I throw out some of these statistics, I mean, they're scary. When you think about 50% of all global pregnancies are unintended, and all of the unintended consequences that come along with that for a young girl, for example.
Yeah, it derails your life.
It derails your life. When I talk about endometriosis, nearly 9 to 10% of women of reproductive age suffer from endometriosis, yet there's no real innovation that is addressing the underlying issue. When I talk about polycystic ovary syndromes, it's a major, not one product is actually indicated for polycystic ovary syndrome.
Well, we have traditionally underinvested in women's health.
And that's what needs to be changed. That has to be a change. And so I hope that Organon is a voice for the wave starting to move in the right direction, as opposed to the wrong direction.
Great. Thanks for joining us.
Okay.
Enjoy the rest
of
good to see you too.
Oh, you too.
Thank you.
All the best.